Yo, Nia Jenny, what's good, fam? It's your boy Southside. Welcome back to Bukhari X channel. If this is your first time bumping on this video, make sure you subscribe. This is Bukhari X. This is a story. This is the place of lifestyle and all things stories. From now on, this is what we're gonna do. We tell my story, my side, and funny things, stories, random stories, or stories that I've prepared. And the last time I've really, I've really enjoyed the love. I've made two stories currently. I did story of Malcolm part 1, and we did life at 23, which is a celebration to which is we'll look back at the life that I had at 23. And if you're watching this, just know that I'm glad this is my first video at 24. My birthday was just some days ago, and happy, and I take this opportunity to wish everyone who was born in August a happy birthday. Legends are born in August, so happy birthday to everyone who's watching and who's born in August, manze. This is a special dedication, manze. August, real OGs. Even Obama was born in August. So the two videos of success, and I see the numbers are increasing every day. And today I'd like to do one of something I started weeks ago, and it's the story of Malcolm. And this story, wow! And this is my perspective of the guy. And I've been researching about him for weeks, even months. And though he lived a short life, he had so much impact that you can't even just finish talking about this guy in one episode. So I think this might even go to part 3, but we'll flow with it. It is what it is, So today we're doing the story of Malcolm part 2. I promised you, and I'm delivering to my promise. And stay tuned, enjoy. Here we go. So we begin from where we left, in 1952. The year is 1952. This is a year which Malcolm is paroled. He's eligible for parole after 6 years in prison. He's released in the month of August. He's released from prison, and he moves to Detroit to live with his brother Wilfred. And it is there that he joins Nation of Islam now as a citizen, a former prisoner. He joins the Nation of Islam in Detroit, Temple number 1. It is there that he starts attending meetings, and he rejects the surname Malcolm X, and it is there that he starts recruiting people, because he sees this is a movement that every black man should join, and he doesn't like the fact that the numbers are low. Remember, in 1952 the membership of that organization was 400. It was very little. And it had been so since 1934. So for 18 years there had been no membership growth. So Malcolm took upon it himself to recruit members. And in 1953, having tripled the membership, Elijah Muhammad sent him back to Boston to serve as the first minister of its temple number 1. He organized temples along the East Coast, including Philadelphia, attracting new members by his oratory skills. Remember, Malcolm, when he was in prison, he had been exposed to literature, and one prisoner encouraged him to read, and it is there that he began to develop his oratory skills, and it is his oratory skills that attracted more members to the movement. And having seen the tremendous growth in 1954, Elijah Muhammad gives him his highest appointment yet, and he becomes the chief minister of Harlem, Temple number 7. temple number 7 is now where Malcolm will be for the rest from 1954 until 1964, till he leaves in 64. So Harlem, it was like a new territory for him, because New York City is a highly populous place for black people, and Malcolm saw that place as a fertile ground, like to really grow the movement, and he was placed there. He was placed there in 1954. In 1955, he attends the Bandung Conference. The Bandung Conference was a conference of recently independent nations from Asia and Africa. At that time, not so many countries had gained independence in Africa, but most were in Asia. It was held in Bandung. Bandung is a city in Indonesia. Yeah, and Malcolm was among those who attended. Him, and together with Congressman Adam Clayton Powell, attended that conference. And that conference, he uses it during his final days at the Nation of Islam in 1963. But we're in 1955. This is the only conference that white man was not allowed to attend. It was an all Asian and African affair, or the dark nation affair. Yeah, so he attends that conference, and in 1956 he meets his wife, or they start dating. He meets a girl called Betty Sanders, and in New York, in Harlem, and it is there they start dating, and in 2 years' time they get married. And an incident happens in 1957 that brings Malcolm to the limelight. In 1957, a member, John Hinton, was savagely beaten by the police. Malcolm joins his fellow Muslims at the 28th Precinct headquarters in Harlem, where he demands that Hinton receive medical attention. And remember, this was during the civil rights era, and black people were still being brutalized. And Malcolm, being a lover of black people, he never liked this. This thing angered him, and a lot of time people were accusing him of being someone who just talks but doesn't take action. So this was he taking action upon himself. Um, he took he went and protested at the police precinct. Him and his members, they went and pitched camp at the police precinct, and this really alarmed the police, and they say, hey, a black man should not have so much power like this. And they refused to leave until the orders were met, until his demands were met. And when they were satisfied, Malcolm signaled his members to leave. He just did this, just signaled them like this, and they left. And this is how the incident became publicized, and that's how Malcolm became known in the national limelight. And this increases surveillance. Remember, the FBI had opened a file in him in 1953, but this one made them to increase surveillance of this guy because he was now considered as a threat. So not so much can be said about Malcolm in 1950s, but a lot of things that happened in the next decade, which is the 1960s. The 1960s were the civil rights era. Okay, the civil rights era began in 1954 after the Brown versus Board of Education. It was a decision about segregation in the United States. So in USA, there's this thing called, the history of the black people is, in 400 years they were enslaved. They were slaves for 400 years. And even after slavery came to an end, you find that the states, especially the states in the South, they really were bitter about this. So they decided to introduce, they were bitter. Okay, they were bitter about slavery being abolished. President Abraham Lincoln abolished slavery in the 1860s, and that led to a civil war that lasted for 4 years. And after the South lost the war, and when the South now became, when they lost the war, The only way they wanted to keep the black people into slavery was by coming up with laws called the Jim Crow laws. The Jim Crow laws were segregation laws. It was just a system of segregation. So the whites had privilege to go to good places. The blacks were given the worst, and they were even in education. The blacks received the worst type of education, and that went for a long time until 1954, when people started to get fed up, and the civil rights movement started in 1954. In 1955 now is the time when it really started, because that is the year a young boy called Emmett Till was lynched in Mississippi, and that was also the year the bus boycotts in Alabama started. That's how Martin Luther King came to rise, and Rosa Parks. You can also research on that, but this is the background building towards 1960s, because the 1960s is the peak of the civil rights era. And this is when we see Malcolm getting more involved into the civil rights, and this is how, eventually will lead to one of the reasons why he left the nation. So in this we are going to look at the what influenced what was in the mind of Malcolm during 1960 to 1963. So a lot of you were in the 60s. So before even 1960 began, we should remember in 1959 the Nation of Islam became like what mainstream. The media got attention of what the Nation of Islam really was. Nation of Islam had been there for 25 years, but it just had, and courtesy of Malcolm X and whatever happened in the late 50s, it got media attention in 1959 when a journalist called Mike Wallace of CBS, produced came up with a television segment in the TV called The Hate Produced. And this is where the public gets to know what Nation of Islam is. Nation of Islam it was, and because it still is, but let me say in context of the 1950s and 60s, Nation of Islam was a black nationalist movement. It was a separatist movement. It advocated for separatism. It wanted to form its own nation, and its leader was Elijah Muhammad. Elijah Muhammad was the leader of the group. It's founded by Walid Din Muhammad, as we told you in the other episode. So Malcolm was its spokesman from 1954, and he became famous for his sentiments. And one of Malcolm's sentiments was against the civil rights movement, because at that time Martin Luther King was leading the civil rights movement, and Martin Luther King's method of resistance was non-violent, and which Malcolm X was against, because he was like, yo, the white man or the white power structure, they are violent with you. How are you gonna be non-violent with them? So that made him have many or what the major differences between him and Martin Luther King. They were always on the opposite side, and it was the Nation of Islam also, advocated for. It was like a hate group, and it is still a hate group right now. And it's, according to Nation of Islam, the white man is a devil, and he's a devil, and Elijah Muhammad, and its leader is Elijah Muhammad, and Elijah Muhammad is so-called prophet. The Nation of Islam believes that Allah came into the flesh, and this Allah is Walid Din Muhammad. And Walid Din Muhammad, it is believed that Walid Din Muhammad or Allah ordained this guy Elijah Poole or Elijah Muhammad to be the prophet. So they believe Elijah Muhammad is the prophet, and everybody takes it as gospel truth. Even Malcolm himself takes it as truth, because this guy has managed to transform him from a drunkard, a pimp, a gangster, to someone, who's, this speaker, this guy who's powerful oratory skills. And that's how Malcolm became, and that's how they became famous And one of the methods Malcolm was he was against non-violence. He wanted the Negroes to respond to violence with violence, or you can say he had a radical way. And many white people took him as as a non-violent or a bigot, and but it but we understand, because also Malcolm came from a very rough childhood. Remember, he grew up in the north, in Detroit. He faced white supremacists, and that's me. I can't blame him, because can't blame him for his views, because he was just reacting to the world he was raised in. Yeah, and these are some of the fearless speeches he made when he was still a Nation of Islam member.
If you're interested in freedom, you need some judo, you need some karate, you need all the things that will help you fight for freedom. Nationalism is the wave of the present and the future. It is nationalism that's bringing freedom to oppressed people all over the world. It was nationalism that brought freedom to the Algerians. It was nationalism that brought freedom to the Nigerians and to the Ghanaians. It was nationalism that brought freedom to the people of Uganda and Tanganyika and Sudan and Somaliland. The Africans didn't get it by sitting in. They didn't get it by waiting in. They didn't get it by singing "We Shall Overcome." They got it through nationalism. And who taught you, please, who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin to such extent that you bleach to get like the white man? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Who taught you to hate your own kind? Who taught you to hate the race that you belong to? So much so that you don't want to be around each other. No, before you come asking Mr. Muhammad, does he teach hate, you should ask yourself who taught you to hate being what God gave you.
So in the 1960s, this is when Malcolm, with media exposure, he gets more famous. And he is really known as the Nation of Islam spokesman. Everything that the nation speaks, it is Malcolm. Malcolm speaks on behalf of that nation. This is way before Louis Farrakhan became, known. Farrakhan was just a young recruit, and so his rise to prominence, his prominence and fame really earned him enemies within the nation, and their deliberate plans to frustrate him. And Malcolm was, usually talked about politics and civil rights. He used to talk about civil rights, but his leader Elijah Muhammad used to tell him, don't get involved. If you watch the series about the Godfather of Harlem, you will see there's a part where Malcolm is told by Elijah Muhammad not to engage in political issues, but he tells him that this Nation of Islam is a religious organization, so we don't do politics. And one of Malcolm's other frustrations is in 1962, a member of Nation of Islam was murdered by the police. There was an altercation at a mosque in Los Angeles, and that resulted into the murder. And Malcolm wanted to take action, but again, Elijah Muhammad advised his members against it, and that Malcolm, it really hurt him, because it wasn't what he believed. He believed in action, and Malcolm wasn't just that guy who just talks. He wanted to speak and also to act, and that angered him. And he went to Los Angeles and he gave a speech. If you have seen the speech in the previous video, where he talks about who taught you how to hate yourself. It was during the funeral of Ronald Stokes. He made that speech against the blessings of Elijah Muhammad. So this also brings, this marks also the beginning of the rift between him and his leader. So in also 1962, he gets wind of the rumors that Elijah Muhammad has had an affair or an extramarital affairs with his secretaries. Three to nine secretaries are pregnant with his son, his babies. And this really destroys Malcolm because it was a shock, because Malcolm believed this guy is a divine man, and he believed this guy is God himself, and and that such a man should not do such thing, and it really hurt him. He tried to brush it aside, but he confirmed that it was true. He went to visit one of those sisters, one of those young secretaries, and he found out it was true. And that's how, and when other people knew that Malcolm will find out, they tried to silence him. They tried to frustrate him and limit his public speaking and limit his writings or coverage in the Muhammad Speaks paper, which is a Nation of Islam paper. And that is from 1963. The year 1963 is when we see a change, and Malcolm's fleet from the Nation of Islam is imminent. Yeah. So from 1963 we start seeing a change in his messaging, and 1963 marks the beginning of the end of his long stint at the Nation of Islam for almost a decade. And we see him transitioning to the civil rights movement in 1963. And 1963, a lot of things happened. Guys, that's all we had for today. Thank you for tuning in to Bukhari X. Next week or next time we are going to do the final part of Story of Malcolm. I know this series has been fire, yo man. Thank you for watching, thank you for staying tuned, and if you like to support, make sure you support us, make sure you support us using the numbers provided below. If you like to join our community, the description is right. The link is right there in the description. Make sure you subscribe once again. Stay tuned. We are back this week with the third part and final of Story of Malcolm. You're gonna enjoy, and I'm grateful to be here once again. It's your boy Bukhari X signing out.